Daniel Reed lived a life no one around him could have ever imagined. On the surface, he was just another ordinary guy. He drove a beat-up old car, wore simple clothes, and spent his days working at a small auto repair shop on the edge of town. To everyone who knew him, he was just another blue-collar worker, living paycheck to paycheck. Some even pitied his quiet, humble existence. But behind this carefully crafted illusion was a truth so massive it was almost unbelievable. Daniel Reed was a self-made millionaire. He was the secret owner of one of the country's fastest-growing tech companies, and his inventions had generated more wealth than he could ever spend in a lifetime. But Daniel hated the attention that came with money. He despised the way it brought out the worst in people, turning friends into fakes and family into strangers. So, he chose to live a double life. Every morning, he'd drive his old clunker to the repair shop, pull on his greasy work uniform, and become the simple mechanic everyone thought he was. Only for people in the entire world knew his true identity, and they were the only ones he trusted. He found peace in the quiet life, in genuine conversations with real people who had no idea of his fortune. He liked observing how people behaved when they thought he had nothing to offer. It was a strange, and sometimes lonely, way to live, but for Daniel, it was a shield. He'd been burned too many times by people who pretended to care, only to be after his money. Even his own relatives had betrayed him in the past. Then, one day, everything changed. That was the day he met Grace Morgan. Grace was a sweet, hard-working young woman who lived in a tiny rented room with her younger sister. To make ends meet, she worked 2 jobs, one at a small coffee shop during the day and another cleaning offices in the evening. Her mother had passed away when she was just a girl, and her father had abandoned them long before. Life had taught Grace to be a fighter. She didn't have wealth or luxury, but she possessed something far more precious: a heart full of resilience and an unbreakable spirit. Daniel first saw her on a cold winter morning when she walked into the repair shop, holding a small box of muffins. Her clothes were worn and simple, but her smile was so warm it could melt the frost in the air. She approached the counter and politely asked if anyone wanted to buy some homemade muffins. She explained she was trying to earn a little extra money for her sister's school fees. Most of the guys in the shop ignored her. A few even snickered quietly. But Daniel saw something else. He saw no shame, no desperation. He saw hope. He saw bravery. He saw a quiet strength he had never encountered before. He bought 2 muffins and asked for her name, and just like that, their story began. Over the next few weeks, Grace became a regular visitor at the shop. Sometimes she'd have more muffins to sell. Other times, she'd bring leftover cookies from the cafe. Sometimes, she'd just pass by with her sister, waving hello. Each time, Daniel made a point to talk to her. He learned about her love for romance novels, even though she rarely had the time to finish one. He learned she dreamed of becoming a photographer but couldn't afford a camera. He learned that she found joy in helping others, even when she had so little herself. And slowly, without even realizing it, Daniel began to fall for her. It wasn't about her looks or anything she owned. He fell for who she was: kind, honest, hardworking, and pure of heart. But as his feelings for her grew, so did his greatest fear. He was falling for her as a simple mechanic, but would she still love him if she knew the truth? What if she discovered he was a secret millionaire? The ghosts of his past haunted him. An ex-girlfriend had once showered him with affection, only to steal a large sum of money and vanish. Friends had used him for lavish gifts and then disappeared. His own relatives had feigned concern only when they needed financial help. Money had poisoned so many of his relationships that Daniel started to believe true. Unconditional love was impossible for someone like him. But Grace felt different. She felt real, honest. She felt like the one person he had been searching for his entire life. Still, that seed of doubt remained, whispering to him every night. What if she only loved the poor version of him? What if her kindness vanished the moment money entered the equation? These questions tortured him, even when she smiled at him, even when she held his hand, even when she told him she was drawn to his gentle heart. So, Daniel made a choice. He decided to keep his secret a little longer. He wanted more time, more certainty. He needed to be sure her love was real. What he didn't realize was that by hiding the truth, he was building the foundation of their relationship on a lie that had the power to shatter them both. As weeks turned into months, Daniel and Grace's bond deepened. They shared long talks over cheap coffee, small meals packed in Tupperware, and stories from their pasts. He'd help her with odd jobs around her small apartment, fixing a leaky faucet or a broken chair. She'd bring him homemade lunches to the shop, worried he wasn't eating well. They were slowly becoming more than just friends. Something profound was growing between them. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange, Grace finally confessed her feelings. Softly, nervously, she took his hand, her fingers trembling slightly, and told him she had fallen for him. In that moment, Daniel felt the world stand still. This was everything he had ever hoped for, everything he had dreamed of. He wanted to tell her everything right then and there. He wanted to reveal his true identity, the empire he had built, and the world he had been hiding from her. He wanted to tell her that her struggles could be over, that he could give her everything she ever wanted. But the fear was a powerful monster. It gripped his heart and silenced his tongue. Instead of revealing the truth, he simply squeezed her hand and said, "I feel the same way." Those 4 words lit up Grace's face with the most brilliant smile he had ever seen. But for Daniel, they created a storm inside him. He was trying to protect her, but in reality, he was building a wall of deceit between them, not realizing how dangerous it would become. Later that night, Daniel sat alone in his secret high-tech office, a place no one in town even knew existed. The building was empty and dark. He stared at the documents on his desk, financial reports showing his company's explosive growth, numbers that represented a fortune he couldn't comprehend, and the future he could build with Grace if he only had the courage to be honest. But then, the memories returned. He remembered the faces of all the people who had pretended to care, the sting of betrayal, the ache of broken trust. The fear began its familiar whisper again. What if she's just like them? What if her love changes when she finds out? What if she breaks your heart, too? Daniel dropped his head into his hands, overwhelmed. He knew he couldn't hide forever. The truth had a way of coming out. But he didn't know how to tell her, how to risk his heart so completely again. And then, something happened that solidified his fear. While dining alone in a restaurant, he overheard 2 of his distant relatives at a nearby table. They didn't know he was there. He listened, frozen, as they plotted how to get closer to him, how to feign support and then manipulate their way into his company. Their greedy whispers brought back every painful memory of betrayal he had ever endured. People smiling to his face while sharpening knives behind his back. As Daniel drove home that night, a new, dangerous idea began to form in his mind. It was a terrible idea, born from years of pain and distrust. He thought, what if I test her? What if I test Grace's loyalty? Just to be sure. Just to protect myself. He hated himself for even thinking it. Grace, with her pure heart and honest smile, didn't deserve to be tested. She had given him no reason to doubt her. But Daniel's fear was now stronger than his logic, stronger than his trust, and perhaps even stronger than the love he was beginning to feel. The fear had taken control. And so, quietly and deliberately, Daniel Reed made a decision. He would test Grace Morgan, not because he didn't love her, but because he was terrified of losing her. He didn't see the irony in his plan. He didn't see that his test was the very thing that could push their love to the brink of collapse. The test had begun. Tyler was following her, as instructed. Seeing her soaked and shivering made him feel sick. "Sir, should I pick her up?" Tyler asked quietly. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to, more than anything, but he couldn't. "No," he finally said. "I'm a broke mechanic. I can't show up in this car." He watched as she finally ran onto a crowded bus, her small, resilient smile still on her face. Back in her tiny apartment, Grace made a simple bowl of instant noodles and video called him. On his end, Daniel scrambled. He ripped off his expensive watch, moved to a sparsely decorated room he kept for these calls, and answered. "Hey you." Grace's face filled the screen. "You look tired," she said, her brow furrowed with concern. She then held up a small jar with a few coins in it. A knot formed in Daniel's stomach. $12. Inside, Madison was waiting, a diamond necklace glittering at her throat and a cold smile on her lips. She stood up, gliding towards them. "Daniel, darling, you're here," she purred, deliberately ignoring Grace. Grace's heart sank. "Darling." She felt Daniel's hand slip from hers as Madison leaned in, placing a possessive hand on his arm. Suddenly, Grace felt small, out of place, and utterly foolish. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to push Madison away, to end this charade, but he was frozen. The test had to continue. Madison ordered the most expensive drinks on the menu and spent the next 10 minutes talking about lavish parties and designer brands, completely ignoring Grace. Grace sat in silence, her confusion mounting. Finally, Madison turned, a smirk on her face. "So, Grace, what is it that you do?" "Something simple, right?" Grace blushed, but answered politely, explaining her job at the cafe. Madison's smirk widened. She then leaned towards Daniel, whispering just loudly enough for Grace to hear. "Daniel, you deserve so much better." That was it. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. And something inside Daniel finally snapped. "Enough," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Madison stopped, her professional actress smile faltering. This wasn't in the script. Grace pushed her chair back and stood up, her voice shaking but firm. "Daniel, if you're ashamed of me, you should just tell me. Don't stand by while your friend insults me." His heart shattered. She wasn't angry about the money or the fancy restaurant. She was hurt by the lack of respect. She turned and walked toward the exit, her head held high. Daniel stumbled after her, his mind reeling. He caught her. "Grace, please, listen to me." She pulled away, her eyes flashing with pain. "I don't need fancy things, Daniel. I just want respect. If I'm not enough for you, just say it." He froze, the truth caught in his throat. How could he explain this monstrous lie? Her eyes, shining with unshed tears, searched his face. "You've changed," she whispered, the words hitting him like a physical blow. He could only watch as she walked away, a crushing weight settling in his chest. Madison appeared at his side. "Sir, do you want me to continue?" He didn't answer. He couldn't take his eyes off Grace's retreating figure as she disappeared into the crowd. For the first time, the doubt was not about her love, but about his own actions. Had he, in his desperate search for the truth, just lost the only person who had ever truly loved him? The morning light felt heavy, filled with a guilt that settled deep in Daniel's chest. He woke up early, his first thought a name, Grace. He snatched his phone from the nightstand, his thumb hovering over the screen, his heart pounding with a desperate hope. He prayed for a message, a sign, anything from her. But the screen was blank. But the screen was blank, no new texts, no missed calls, just the cold, digital silence that confirmed his worst fears. His heart sank, a lead weight pulling him down. He knew it. He knew he'd pushed his ridiculous test too far. He wanted to call her, to hear her voice, to explain, but a paralyzing fear held him back. What could he even say? So, he swallowed the words and got ready for work, the silence of his apartment echoing the emptiness inside him. At the auto shop, the day dragged on. Every time the bell above the door chimed, Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes searching for her. He imagined Grace walking in, a small, forgiving smile on her face, ready to pretend yesterday never happened. But she never came. The hours passed like a slow-motion film reel of disappointment. He tried to focus on his work, tinkering with an engine, but his mind was elsewhere. He was distracted, replaying every moment, every mistake. She pulled up in the test car, the shiny vehicle that had been the stage for his elaborate lie. As she stepped out, she immediately noticed the storm on Daniel's face. "Did something happen?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Daniel couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at a greasy rag in his hands as if it held the answers to the universe. "Grace saw us yesterday," he mumbled, the words tasting like ash. Sabrina let out a long, deep sigh. It wasn't a sigh of surprise, but of weary resignation. "And you heard her," she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "You know that, right?" Silence. Daniel couldn't bring himself to nod, to admit the truth out loud. Admitting it would make it too real. Sabrina's expression softened, but her words were firm. "Stop this, Daniel. Stop it before it's too late. Before you break something you can't fix." He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "I can't. Not yet," he whispered. The words barely audible. Sabrina's face fell. She just left the keys on the counter and walked out of the shop, leaving Daniel alone with his spiraling thoughts, feeling more lost than ever before. Meanwhile, miles away, Grace woke up to a world that felt muted and gray. Her eyes were swollen and puffy, a testament to the river of tears she'd cried all night. Her best friend, Emma, walked in quietly, placing a cup of warm tea on her bedside table. A concerned coworker approached her desk. "Hey, are you okay?" Grace quickly wiped her eyes, forcing another weak smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." That evening, Daniel couldn't take the silence anymore. He dialed her number, his heart hammering against his ribs. Her mind screamed to answer it, but her heart couldn't bear it. She let it ring, the sound piercing the quiet room, until it finally went to voicemail. Daniel immediately tried again. And again, she let it ring, each unanswered call feeling like another wall being built between them. Panic began to claw at Daniel's throat. He grabbed his keys and flew out the door, driving towards her house as if his life depended on it. He parked by the small gate, his car's engine humming in the quiet street, and there she was. He saw her sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, looking small and lost under the evening sky. His heart ached just looking at her. He got out of the car and walked toward her, his footsteps feeling loud and intrusive. When she heard him, Grace stood up abruptly, quickly trying to wipe the tears from her face, as if she was ashamed of her own pain. "Grace," he said her name, his voice soft and full of regret. She wouldn't look at him. "Daniel, you don't have to explain," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. He took a hesitant step closer. "I do. I have to. Please, just listen to me." Grace shook her head, a silent refusal. That small sound sent a sharp, physical pain through Daniel's heart. "That's not true," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You mean everything to me." Finally, she looked up at him. Her beautiful eyes, usually so full of life and warmth, were now just pools of hurt and confusion. So, he uttered the only lie he could think of, a lie that felt more like a betrayal than the truth ever could. I'm just confused. No, there's no one else, he said, perhaps too quickly, too defensively. Grace looked at him, her gaze filled with a profound sadness. Then why does she look at you like that? Like she owns a part of you I'll never have? Daniel had no answer. Because how could he explain Sabrina's role in his life without revealing the entire charade? Grace took a shaky breath, gathering her remaining strength. Daniel, maybe you should take some time. Maybe you need space to figure things out. The ground seemed to drop out from under him. Panic seized him. Grace, no. Please don't do this, but she cut him off, her voice gentle but firm. I'm going to step back. It's your path to choose. And with that, she turned around and walked back into her house. Daniel stood there, frozen, watching her go, feeling utterly and completely helpless. The door closed with a soft click, a sound that echoed the finality of the moment. He was left standing alone in the darkness, the crushing weight of his own creation finally settling in. He had started this test to see if he could find true love, and now, he was losing it because of the very test he designed. Maybe it's time to stop the test. Sir, she doesn't deserve this kind of pain. Daniel closed his eyes, his mind a battlefield of confusion and fear. He was supposed to be in control, but everything was spiraling out. Meanwhile, Grace forced herself out of bed. She had to go to work. Standing in front of the mirror, she tried to hide the swelling with makeup, forcing a smile that didn't reach her red-rimmed eyes. Be strong, she whispered to her reflection, her voice trembling. Daniel couldn't stand it anymore. He had to see her. I'm working, she replied, her tone as cold as ice. Defeated, Daniel sat at an empty table in the corner, his eyes never leaving her. He watched her move through the cafe, a painful ache in his chest. Grace felt his gaze on her, a constant, heavy pressure, and she made a point to avoid his corner every time she passed. When her break finally came, she knew she couldn't avoid him any longer. Taking a deep breath, she walked over to his table and sat down, her posture stiff. Say what you want to say. Daniel looked into her tired eyes. I'm so sorry about last night. Grace didn't respond. She just stared at the wooden table, tracing the patterns with her eyes. Finally, she asked the question that had been tormenting her all night. Who is Madison to you? Daniel hesitated. The truth would expose everything. So he lied again. She's just an old friend. Grace's face fell. She could feel it in her gut, another lie. Her voice was barely a whisper. Then go be with her. Daniel flinched as if struck. Grace, no, that's not what I want. But it was too late. Grace stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm done being embarrassed. I'm done with this. Daniel reached out and gently grabbed her wrist. Please, don't leave. His touch sent a jolt through her, but it was a jolt of pain, not passion. She pulled her hand away. You're not the same person I thought you were. Daniel. Without another glance, she turned and walked back to her station, leaving him alone at the table. Daniel sat there for a long moment before leaving the cafe, feeling more empty and broken than he ever had in his life. He leaned against the cool brick wall outside, burying his face in his hands, the weight of his deception crushing him. Just then, his phone rang. It was Tyler. "Sir, there's a problem. A reporter is looking for you. They're asking about your secret girlfriend." Daniel's blood ran cold. How? How did they find out?" "I don't know, sir," Tyler said, his voice urgent, "but they might be on their way to Grace. They could find her." Panic seized Daniel. He raced to his car, his mind screaming. He had to get to her first. Meanwhile, Grace finished her shift, feeling physically and emotionally drained. She stepped outside into the cool evening air, hoping it would clear her head. But before she could take more than a few steps, a woman with a microphone and a cameraman suddenly blocked her path. "Ma'am, excuse me. Do you know a man named Daniel Reed?" Grace froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Why are you asking?" The reporter gave her a predatory smile. Grace just stared, her mind struggling to process the words. "Rich." The reporter leaned in closer. "The rumor is he's secretly dating a poor girl from this neighborhood. Is that you?" Grace's stomach twisted into a tight, painful knot. Suddenly it all started to make sense. The fancy car, he said, was borrowed. The unexplained absences. The fight about Madison. "No, this can't be true," she whispered, her voice barely audible. A small crowd was beginning to gather, phones held up, recording her shock and confusion. Grace felt trapped, panicking as she stumbled backward. Suddenly, a car screeched to a halt, and Daniel leaped out, pushing through the crowd. "Pushing through the crowd," he yelled, his voice raw with fury. The reporters immediately turned their attention to him. A flurry of flashes and shouted questions. Grace backed away, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She stared at him, this stranger in expensive clothes, surrounded by chasm, felt a chasm open between them. Daniel moved to shield her, putting himself between her and the cameras. "Is she the secret fiancée?" one reporter shouted. Grace heard the word and flinched. "Fiancée," she whispered, the world spinning around her. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second. It was over. There were no more lies to hide behind. He turned to her, his voice soft and desperate. "Grace, I can explain everything." But she just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You lied. You lied about everything." He reached for her hand, but she recoiled as if burned. "Don't touch me." Every agonizing second was captured by the cameras. "Grace, please," Daniel began, but she didn't wait to hear it. She turned and ran, disappearing into the dark alley behind the cafe. Daniel shoved his way through the reporters and chased after her. He found her pressed against the cold brick wall, crying silently, her body trembling. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "Grace, I'll tell you the truth now. All of it." She slowly lifted her head, her face tear-streaked and pale. "Even if it breaks me?" she asked, her voice hollow. Daniel nodded, his own heart breaking. "I'm not broke. I'm a millionaire." Grace gasped, the air knocked out of her lungs. "And I lied," he continued, forcing the words out. "I lied because I wanted to test you, to see if your love was real, or if you were just after money." Fresh tears welled in Grace's eyes, but this time they were tears of betrayal. "You tested me. You treated our love like a game. I was scared," he pleaded, taking a step closer. "I was so scared of being used, of losing you if you found out." Grace took a step back, creating more distance between them. A sad, final smile touched her lips. "You were so afraid of losing me," she said, her voice shaking, "that you lost me yourself." With that, she slowly turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the darkness of the alley. Daniel watched her go until she was out of sight. Then, the strength left his legs, and he collapsed to his knees, the full weight of his mistake crashing down on him. In his desperate attempt to protect his heart, he had destroyed the only real love he had ever known. Every step felt heavy, as if her feet were dragging the weight of the world. He offered those fake, empty smiles while she felt completely invisible, utterly humiliated. Tears blurred her vision, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. Not yet. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, a futile attempt to hold the broken pieces of her heart together. She whispered to the empty alley, "Why would he do this? Why would he lie to me so cruelly?" She remembered every single detail, the snickering laughter, the cruel teasing, the way Madison leaned into Daniel as if she owned him. Her chest tightened with a pain so sharp it felt physical. Grace had always trusted Daniel, always believed in the love he claimed to have for her. Now, that trust was shattered, like a delicate glass dropped onto a cold, hard floor. She felt small, insignificant, and yet, she knew she had loved him with every fiber of her being. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Daniel sat slumped on the cold pavement, his hands gripping his knees so tightly his knuckles were white. He had wanted to run after her, to grab her, to try and explain the mess he'd made, but fear and shame had frozen him in place. He hated himself for the lies, for the cruel games, for the ridiculous test he had concocted. He had wanted to know if Grace loved him for who he was, not for his family's wealth. But now he saw that his stupid test had likely destroyed the only real thing he had. His driver Tyler's words echoed in his mind. Sir, if she loves you, she will stay. But Daniel wasn't so sure anymore. His heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible, powerful hand. He whispered into the darkness, I can't lose her. I can't lose the only person who ever truly loved me. The streetlights flickered above, casting long, distorted shadows that perfectly mirrored the despair in his soul. Grace finally reached a small park bench, her body trembling with exhaustion and emotional overload. She collapsed onto it, burying her face in her hands. The tears she'd held back finally came, falling silently, soaking the simple fabric of her blouse. She had never, ever felt so betrayed. Every happy moment she had shared with Daniel, every shared laugh, every gentle touch, every whispered word of love, it was all tainted now, poisoned by the secrets he had kept. She had felt so secure, so safe, so loved. And in one night, all of that security had vanished into thin air. She couldn't wrap her head around why someone she loved so deeply would intentionally put her through such agonizing pain. Her hands shook as she recalled his soft reassurances, the way he used to look at her, the way he made her feel like she was the only person in the world. It all felt like a cruel performance now, a twisted act designed to test her. The thought made her chest ache as if she'd been repeatedly punched. She whispered into the cold night air, I can't believe I let him hurt me like this. I trusted him, and he lied. Just then, she heard footsteps behind her. Her whole body tensed, instinct telling her to run, but the rhythm of the steps was unfamiliar. Then, a voice she knew all too well called out softly, Grace. Her heart leaped into her throat, a chaotic mix of hope and fear holding her frozen in place. Slowly, she turned. It was Daniel, approaching her cautiously, his eyes filled with an emotion she hadn't seen in days, pure, raw regret, sorrow, and utter desperation. His simple, worn-out clothes didn't matter anymore. His presence alone sent her heart into a frantic rhythm. Grace, please, wait, he said, his voice trembling. She folded her arms across her chest, a shield against more pain, and looked away. I can't trust you, she whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. Not after everything. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. I know, he admitted, his voice low and sincere. I know I've hurt you, and I deserve every bit of your anger, but I had to tell you everything. I can't hide it anymore. I can't keep you in the dark. Grace finally turned to face him, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks, her eyes a storm of anger and vulnerability. You tested me like I was some kind of game, Daniel. How could you do that to me? She demanded, her voice rising, in a move that made her heart ache even more. Daniel knelt on the cold ground before her. I was scared, Grace. I was terrified of losing the only girl who ever loved me for who I am, not for what I have. I was a fool, and I was so wrong. Please, just listen to me. Grace shook her head, disbelief warring with the ache in her heart. Listen, you want me to listen after what you did? She asked, her voice cracking. You humiliated me. You pushed me away. You made me feel completely worthless. How am I supposed to just listen? Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. Because the truth is, every act, every test, every lie, I did it out of fear, not cruelty. I desperately wanted to know if your love was real, and now I see, I was wrong to ever doubt you. I should have trusted you from the very beginning. Grace looked at him, her skepticism warring with a flicker of curiosity. Then tell me, she whispered. Tell me the truth now, all of it. No more lies, no more games. Daniel took a deep, shaky breath, his hands trembling as he reached for hers. Grace Morgan. I am not broke. I am a millionaire. I pretended to be poor to see if you would love me for who I am, not for my money. I hired Madison to test your loyalty. I was scared of getting hurt, scared of losing you. I see now that in my fear, I almost destroyed the most precious love I've ever known. Grace's eyes widened, her mind struggling to process his confession. You did all this. You lied, and tested me, like this. Her voice trembled with disbelief. Yes, Daniel whispered. And I regret it with every part of my soul. I'm ready to accept whatever you decide. Your anger, your pain, or your forgiveness. Whatever you choose. Grace's lips trembled. I need time. I don't know if I can forgive you this quickly. Daniel managed a faint, sad smile, a single tear slipping down his cheek. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll wait forever if I have to. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the night air around them heavy with unspoken emotions. Grace could still feel her anger and hurt, but she couldn't deny the raw sincerity shining in Daniel's eyes. She remembered all the little things, the countless times he'd been there for her, the small acts of kindness, the easy laughter, the genuine warmth and love he had shown in ways that had nothing to do with money. Slowly, her heart began to soften. Show me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Show me that you truly care. Daniel nodded immediately and gently led her by the hand to a small, nearby cafe. Inside, Tyler was waiting with a huge bouquet of her favorite flowers and a large envelope. Grace's eyes filled with tears as she realized this had been planned. Daniel handed her the envelope. She opened it to find photographs. Pictures of him helping impoverished families, secretly donating to struggling schools, and quietly supporting people without any publicity or fanfare. Her hands shook as she looked through each image, her tears falling freely now. She looked up at Daniel, who was now kneeling on one knee before her. "Grace Morgan, I love you more than anything in this world. Will you forgive me and be with me? Truly." This time, Grace's chest felt tight, the tears spilling uncontrollably. She looked from the photos to the man kneeling before her, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. You really cared all this time," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Every single moment." Grace lowered her head, completely overcome. I thought you didn't trust me. I was a fool," Daniel admitted softly. "Now, I trust you completely. No more lies." Grace took a deep breath and slowly extended her hand. Daniel took it gently in his eye. "Forgive you," she whispered. "I promise to never hurt you again," Daniel said, pulling her into a tight embrace. They held each other, and the city lights seemed to cast a warm glow around them. The pain, the lies, the tussle of it began to fade into the background. Grace rested her head on Daniel's chest, finally feeling safe again. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I know," Daniel whispered into her hair. "But we're here now. Together." Grace smiled softly, and Daniel's heart soared. They walked to his mansion slowly, hand in hand, ready to start their life over, this time without any secrets. Inside, he surprised her with a small, delicate, heart-shaped necklace. She hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daniel, and I love you, Grace. Forever," he whispered back. That night, as they sat together watching the glittering city lights from the window, the fear, the pain, and the lies all melted away, leaving only love, trust, and the beautiful promise of a future together.